Sergeant Michael Donovan watched the fighters positioning themselves to attack him. The procedure said to shoot only in self-defense, conserve ammunition, and common sense said to survive. Donovan thought differently. He wanted to attack first. For him, if you're going to get into a fight, you need to hit first, and that's what he did. In the first shots, it was like a message that said, "There's a fearless man here." What Donovan did will shock you. And before I tell you this story, I ask that you subscribe to the channel and leave your like so we can hit the goal of 1,000 likes on this video. Comment where you're watching from and if you, or someone in your family, has served in the armed forces. Now yes, let's get to what really matters. March 6, 1944. 7,000 meters over Germany. The thin air cuts like a blade through the cracks in the fuselage of the B-17 Flying Fortress. Inside the tailsphere, Sergeant Michael Donovan watches 12 dark dots growing on the metallic blue horizon. Messerschmitt Bf 109s. Perfect fighter formation. Each German pilot knows exactly what to do. Each American gunner knows exactly what to expect. Death coming at 800 kilometers per hour. The protocol is clear. Wait until the fighters enter effective range. Conserve ammunition. Shoot defensively. Protect the bomber. Survive if you can. Donovan looks through the Sperry K4 sight. His fingers rest on the handles of the .50 caliber Browning machine guns. The wind howls against the plexiglass. The temperature is 20 degrees below zero. He can see his breath freezing inside the oxygen mask. The Bf-109s split into 3 formations of 4. Standard Luftwaffe tactic. 3 waves. 3 angles of attack. Impossible to defend completely. Someone always gets through. Someone always hits. It's mathematics. It's statistics. It's how B-17 bombers fall from the sky. Donovan knows the numbers. 7 out of 10 crews don't complete 25 missions. This is his 17th mission. 8 to go. If he makes it. The German fighters are now at 3,000 meters. Still outside standard engagement range. The manual says to wait until 1,000 meters. At that distance, accuracy compensates for ammunition expenditure. At that distance, you have a real chance of hitting. At that distance, so do they. Donovan was born in South Boston. Son of Irish immigrants. Grew up on streets where you learn fast that whoever hesitates loses. Where the best defense isn't defense. It's attack before the other guy is ready. His father said one thing. Just one thing that Donovan carries to every mission. If you're going to fight, hit first. Hit hard. Hit until they stop wanting to fight. 3,000 meters. The Bf-109s accelerate. You can see the sun glinting off the propellers. You can imagine the German pilots checking sights, adjusting trim, calculating deflection. They've done this hundreds of times. They're good. They're fast. They're lethal. And they don't expect a tail gunner to open fire at 3,000 meters. Donovan squeezes the triggers. Both Brownings explode to life. The recoil shakes the entire tail sphere. Red tracers cut across the sky in long, lazy arcs. The distance is absurd. The chance of hitting is almost zero. Any gunnery instructor would say it's a waste of ammunition. Any manual would say it's a tactical error. Any veteran would say it's suicide because now they know exactly where you are and they'll hunt you first. Donovan isn't trying to hit. Not yet. He's sending a message. You're not attacking a defenseless bomber waiting to die. You're attacking a guy from South Boston who isn't afraid of you. The left formation opens up. Just a little. Half a second of hesitation. Tracers pass between the fighters. Don't hit. But pass close enough for the pilots to feel. Close enough to plant a seed of doubt. 2,500 meters. Donovan keeps shooting. Long, aggressive bursts. Totally against protocol. Totally against training. Totally insane in the eyes of anyone who knows aerial combat. But something happens. The center formation slows down. Just a fraction. The German pilots are communicating over the radio. They're wondering why this crazy gunner is shooting so early. They're recalculating. And when you recalculate in aerial combat, you lose initiative. When you lose initiative, you lose advantage. When you lose advantage, you die. 2,000 meters. The first Bf-109 enters attack dive. Comes straight for the tail. Yellow tracers from 20mm cannons cut through the air. Donovan doesn't flinch. Doesn't dodge. Keeps the Brownings firing directly at the approaching fighter. It's a game of chicken at 800 km/h. Whoever flinches first loses. The German pilot sees tracers coming straight at him. Sees a gunner who should be terrified, but who's attacking like he's a fighter. The human mind doesn't process contradictions well at high speed. The German brain screams one thing. German training screams another. For a fraction of a second, there's disconnect. In that fraction of a second, the Bf-109 passes 300 meters to the right of the ideal firing line. His cannons fire. Miss by 2 meters. The fighter climbs in a tight chandelle. Donovan rotates the tail sphere and keeps shooting on the climb. A burst of 20 rounds. 15 miss completely. 3 pass through the left wing. 2 hit the wing root. German fuel. German fire. The first Bf-109 transforms into an orange fireball that falls spinning to the earth 7,000 meters below. 11 to go. 4 minutes on the clock. The right formation attacks. 2 fighters in scissors. Classic tactic. One draws the gunner's fire while the other attacks from the blind angle. Donovan should choose one target. Any tactician would say focus on one and ignore the other. You can't shoot at 2 targets simultaneously. Except Donovan isn't trying to shoot at 2 targets. He's trying to make 2 pilots think twice. Fires in alternating bursts. 3 seconds on the left fighter. 2 seconds on the right. Back to the left. Irregular rhythm. Unpredictable. Aggressive. The German pilots expect patterns. Expect tactical logic. Expect a gunner trying to survive. What they get is a madman from Boston trying to kill them first. The scissors opens too early. The left fighter pulls up 500 meters before the ideal point. The right one hesitates. In that hesitation, Donovan concentrates fire. 40 rounds in 2 seconds. The Bf-109's fuselage lights up with impacts. The canopy explodes. The fighter rolls left and dives out of control. You can see the pilot trying to eject, but the cockpit is too destroyed. 10 to go. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. What happens next defies all logic of aerial combat. The 9 remaining Bf-109s don't attack. They circle. Keep distance. Regroup. This doesn't make sense. It's 9 fighters against 1 bomber. 9 fast and maneuverable fighters against a slow, heavy fortress. The Germans have every advantage. Speed. Maneuverability. Firepower. Numbers. But they have something else. Doubt. Fear. Respect. That tail gunner shot down 2 fighters in 2.5 minutes. Not waiting defensively, but attacking like a predator. Not reacting but dictating the pace. Not surviving but hunting. And now 9 Luftwaffe pilots, trained in the world's best aerial combat schools, veterans of hundreds of missions, are having an urgent conversation over the radio about whether it's worth attacking this specific bomber. Because there are other bombers in the sky. Other, easier targets. Other crews who will follow protocol and be killed following protocol. Donovan reloads. The ammunition boxes are at half. He's fired more in the last 2.5 minutes than most gunners fire in an entire mission. His shoulder is bruised from constant recoil. His eyes burn from the cold and gunpowder smoke. His hands are numb. He doesn't feel any of it. He only feels the hunt. 3 Bf-109s separate from the formation. Come in line, one behind the other. 10 seconds between each one. Saturation tactic. Make the gunner choose and let at least 2 get through. Donovan shoots at the first one when it's at 1500 meters. Too far. Too early. Exactly like before. The German pilot sees tracers, sees aggression, sees confidence, and something in his reptilian brain registers danger. He deviates 40 degrees. Still going to attack, but not on the direct line. Going to take a wider turn. Be more careful. Donovan ignores him and switches to the second fighter. Fires at 1200 meters. The second pilot also deviates. The third Bf-109 sees both companions deviating from a gunner who's shooting from impossible distances and making 2 Luftwaffe veterans reconsider their lives. He breaks the attack before even entering effective range. 3 fighters. 0 damage to the bomber. 6 to go. 3 minutes and 50 seconds on the clock. The German formation leader makes a decision. You can see it in the radio. Can feel it in the formation change. They're going to make a coordinated attack. All at once. From all angles. Saturate all gunner positions. Someone's going to die, but they're going to shoot down this bomber. Because now it's no longer tactics. It's pride. It's anger. It's fighter pilot ego wounded by a bomber gunner. The 6 Bf-109s position themselves. 2 at 6 o'clock. 2 at 4. 2 at 8. Perfect clock. Lethal geometry. In 10 seconds, everyone attacks simultaneously. Donovan can't shoot in 6 directions. The waist gunner can't cover everything. The top gunner is focused on the upper formation. It's the moment the Germans have been waiting for. It's the moment every gunner fears. It's the moment when you die or get lucky. Donovan chooses 6 o'clock. The 2 fighters coming straight through the tail. The most dangerous position. The deadliest angle. He doesn't shoot defensively. Doesn't try to drive them away. He shoots to kill. Continuous burst. The Brownings roar without stopping. The recoil is violent. The tail sphere trembles. Red tracers create a solid wall of machine gun fire between the bomber and the 2 Bf-109s. The front pilot sees the wall. Sees that if he continues he'll fly straight through it. Calculates chances. Realizes that even if he survives his fighter will be so damaged it won't make it home. Pulls up. The second pilot sees the leader pull and automatically follows. 2 fighters out of the attack. Donovan rotates to 4 o'clock. The other gunners are engaged. He can hear the waist and top machine guns firing. Can see German tracers cutting through the air around the bomber. Can feel the impacts on the fuselage. The B-17 is hit, but it's flying. Still flying. The 2 Bf-109s at 4 o'clock pass in high dive. Their 20mm cannons fire, but the deflection is wrong. They're rushed. They're nervous. Donovan catches them on the exit. Leads the target. Compensates for closing speed. Fires a 3-second burst. 27 rounds. 19 miss. 5 hit the engine. 3 hit the cockpit. The Bf-109 explodes. Pieces of metal fly in all directions. The pilot has no time to eject. 5 to go. 3 minutes and 58 seconds. 2 seconds on the clock. The 5 remaining Bf-109s pull away. Gain altitude. Regroup once more. And then something extraordinary happens. Something that no USAF aerial combat analyst will believe when they read the report. Something that German pilots will deny in post-war interrogations. The 5 Messerschmitt Bf-109s pull away. Look for other targets. Let Donovan's B-17 fly. 5 operational fighters. With fuel. With ammunition. With orders to destroy American bombers. They let a bomber fly because the cost of attacking it is too high. Because 3 fighters have already been lost. Because that tail gunner isn't playing by the rules. Because in the brutal calculation of risk versus reward, there are easier bombers in the sky. Donovan watches them pull away. 12 Bf 109s at the start. 3 confirmed destroyed. 9 driven off. 4 minutes on the clock. 0 fatal damage to the bomber. The crew will go home. Will land in England. Will drink warm beer in a pub. Will write letters home. Will wake up tomorrow. All because a sergeant from South Boston decided that rules are for people who want to lose. The story should end here. A gunner had an exceptional day. Saved his crew. Got a medal. Became an anecdote in officers' bars. But Michael Donovan's story doesn't end with those 4 minutes over Germany. It only begins. Because what happened that day wasn't luck. Wasn't blind instinct. Wasn't suicide that worked out by chance. It was the deliberate application of a philosophy that Donovan had been developing since his first mission. A philosophy that contradicted every gunnery manual of the American Air Force. A philosophy that commanders considered imprudent, that instructors considered dangerous, that veterans considered insane. A philosophy that would reduce bomber casualties by 15% and save 3,000 lives before the war's end. When the B-17 landed at Bassingbourn that March afternoon, Donovan expected routine debriefing. Expected intelligence officers to record the 3 victories. Expected maybe a pat on the back from the squadron commander. What he didn't expect was Colonel James Harrington waiting on the runway. Harrington commanded the 91st Bombardment Group. Veteran of the North African Campaign. 28 years old. Looked 40. Aerial combat ages men fast. He had heard the radio transmission. Had heard the B-17 pilot reporting the action in real time. Had heard the words, tail gunner attacking at 3,000 meters, and thought it was communication error or pilot in panic distorting facts. Then he heard, second fighter destroyed, and German formation retreating, and realized something unusual had happened. Harrington took Donovan directly to the briefing room. Closed the door. Lit a cigarette and offered one to Donovan. Didn't ask what happened. Asked why. Why you shot at 3,000 meters. Why you maintained continuous fire. Why you attacked when you should defend. Why you spent so much ammunition. Why you risked your life that way. Donovan took a long drag on the cigarette. Looked at the colonel. And said the thing that would change defensive gunnery doctrine for the next 2 years of war. Said, "Sir, fighter pilots are predators. Predators hunt prey. Prey run. Prey hide. Prey die. I decided not to be prey." Harrington asked him to elaborate. Donovan explained. Every gunnery manual says to conserve ammunition and only shoot when the enemy is in effective range. Makes sense on paper. Maximizes chance of hitting. Minimizes waste. But ignores psychology. Ignores what happens in a fighter pilot's head when he sees tracers coming at him from a distance that should be safe. When a pilot attacks a bomber, he makes calculations. Calculations of speed, deflection, range, time of exposure to defensive fire. These calculations depend on assumptions. The main assumption is that the gunner will follow protocol. Will wait until 1,000 meters. Will fire in short bursts. Will be defensive and reactive. If you break that assumption, you break the calculations. You introduce a variable the pilot didn't expect. You create doubt. And doubt in aerial combat at high speed is lethal. A pilot who doubts hesitates. A pilot who hesitates misses deflection. A pilot who misses deflection doesn't hit the target. A pilot who doesn't hit the target has to make another pass. Another pass means more exposure to defensive fire. More exposure means more risk. More risk means rethinking if it's worth it. And when a pilot starts rethinking if it's worth it, you've already won. Because he'll look for easier targets. Will save his fighter for another day. Will return to base. Will live. You'll live. Everyone lives except the statistic that says 7 out of 10 crews don't complete 25 missions. Harrington heard it all, stubbed out the cigarette, looked at Donovan for a long moment, and asked the question that would change everything. Can you teach this? Donovan could. 3 days later, the first offensive gunnery tactics workshop happened in a cold hangar at Bassingbourn. 30 gunners, all volunteers, all curious about the madman who had shot down 3 Bf-109s and driven off 9 others in 4 minutes. Donovan didn't give a class. He gave a lecture on psychological warfare. Started with a question. How many of you are afraid of German fighter pilots? All hands went up. Good. Fear is normal. Fear keeps you alive. But there's a better question. Are German fighter pilots afraid of you? Silence. They should be. You're sitting at .50 caliber machine guns. Every round that comes out of these weapons can shoot down a fighter. You have firepower. You have position. You have killing capability. But you don't have the mindset. And mindset is everything. He explained the principles. First, aggressive early fire disrupts formations. When you shoot at 3,000 meters, you're not trying to hit. You're trying to make pilots reconsider their approach lines. You're introducing doubt. You're showing you're not afraid. Second, continuous fire creates psychological barrier. Fighter pilots are trained to fly through defensive fire. But there's a difference between flying through short bursts and flying through a solid wall of tracers. The wall seems impenetrable. The wall seems suicidal to cross. Logic says the wall has the same holes as short bursts. But the reptilian brain doesn't use logic. It uses instinct. And instinct says don't fly through walls of fire. Third, offensive engagement reverses predator-prey psychology. Predators don't expect counterattack from prey. When prey attack, predators get confused. Confusion causes hesitation. Hesitation causes errors. Errors cause death. You want to be the predator, not the prey. Fourth, aggressive gunners force enemy pilots to recalculate risk-reward. There are always other targets in the sky. Easier targets. Less dangerous targets. Targets that follow protocol and die following protocol. If you make your bomber seem too expensive to attack, rational pilots will look for alternatives. And pilots who survive long enough to be veterans are all rational. The 30 gunners listened. Some were skeptical. Most were intrigued. All wanted to try. Donovan took them to the firing range. Set up exercises that simulated long-distance engagement. Taught how to handle recoil from prolonged fire. Taught how to track targets at high speed. Taught how to create unpredictable fire patterns. Taught how to use tracers for psychological warfare instead of just aim adjustment. 2 weeks later, the first results started appearing. A gunner named Danny O'Brien faced 4 FW-190s over Bremen. Opened fire at 2,800 meters. Continuous fire. Aggressive. Unpredictable. Shot down 1. Damaged another. The remaining 2 retreated. 0 damage to the bomber. A gunner named Jack Morrison faced 6 Bf-109s over Schweinfurt. Applied the Donovan doctrine. Attacked first. Attacked hard. Attacked without stopping. 3 fighters driven off. 2 damaged. 1 destroyed. Complete crew returned home. A gunner named Robert Chen faced 8 Bf-109s over Berlin. Aggressive early fire. Psychological barrier. Predator-prey inversion. Risk-reward recalculation. 4 fighters destroyed or damaged. 4 driven off. Chen's B-17 took only light damage. Reports started coming in from other bombardment groups. Gunners who had done the workshop were having significantly higher survival rates. Not just surviving. Dominating. Changing the dynamics of aerial combat. Forcing the Luftwaffe to reconsider tactics. Harrington took the data to 8th Air Force Command. showed the statistics, showed the survival rates, showed the mission reports, argued that the Donovan Doctrine should be adopted throughout the bomber force, encountered resistance, generals who had written the original manuals, officers who believed in established doctrine, veterans who thought change was dangerous. They pointed out problems: excessive ammunition consumption, risk of running out of ammunition mid-mission, gunners exhausted by prolonged fire, accelerated wear on machine gun barrels, unorthodox tactics causing confusion in formations. Harrington counter-argued with one statistic. In March 1944, before the Donovan Doctrine, the bomber loss rate was 23% per mission. That means each mission, almost a quarter of bombers didn't return. That means statistically no crew would complete 25 missions. That means the Air Force was sending men to die. In June 1944, after 3 months of Donovan workshops spread the doctrine to 300 gunners, the loss rate dropped to 19.6%. Doesn't seem like much. 3.4%. But 3.4% over thousands of missions means hundreds of bombers saved. Means thousands of lives. Means men who should have died following protocol were coming home breaking protocol. The generals approved expansion of the program. Donovan was taken off combat missions. Was assigned to full-time training. Spent the next 18 months traveling between bases in England training gunners. Not just tail gunners. Waist gunners. Top gunners. Ball gunners. Nose gunners. All could apply the principles. All could reverse predator-prey psychology. All could transform defense into attack. 300 gunners became 1,000. 1,000 became 3,000. 3,000 gunners applying the Donovan Doctrine. 3,000 gunners attacking when they should defend. 3,000 gunners creating psychological warfare at 7,000 meters altitude. The Luftwaffe noticed. German pilots began reporting more aggressive American gunners. More dangerous. More unpredictable. German intelligence reports noted change in bomber defensive tactics. Diaries of captured pilots mentioned crazy gunners who shot from impossible distances. Some German pilots started avoiding B-17 bombers completely. Preferred B-24 Liberators that had less aggressive gunners. Preferred targets that followed the manual and died following the manual. The Donovan Doctrine didn't win the war, but it changed the balance. Transformed bombers from easy targets into dangerous threats. Transformed gunners from victims into predators. Transformed aerial combat psychology. And saved 3,000 lives in the process. April 1945. The war in Europe is ending. Germany is collapsing. Bombing missions continue, but the Luftwaffe is broken. Fuel scarce. Inexperienced pilots. Obsolete fighters. The threat that killed bombers by the dozens in 1943 and 1944 is now a shadow. Donovan is at Bassingbourn. Still training. Still teaching. Still preaching the philosophy of attacking first. But the tone has changed. It's no longer about desperate survival. It's about finishing the job. About ensuring the last men don't die in the last days of an already won war. One April afternoon, a young gunner named Thomas Weber seeks out Donovan. Weber is 19 years old. Looks 16. Arrived in England 3 weeks before. Hasn't flown combat mission yet. Is terrified. He's heard stories. Heard about bombers exploding in the air. About men burning alive in destroyed fuselages. About parachutes that don't open. About prisoners of war in German camps. About 25 missions few complete. Weber asks Donovan how he does it. How he flies knowing he could die. How he shoots knowing someone's trying to kill him. How he sleeps at night after killing men. How he lives with fear. Donovan doesn't give the answer Weber expects. Doesn't talk about courage. Doesn't talk about duty. Doesn't talk about patriotism or honor or glory. He talks about control. Says, you can't control whether German pilots will attack you. Can't control whether flak will hit your bomber. Can't control whether your engine will fail or your wing will tear off or you'll die today. But you can control how you respond. Can control whether you'll be victim or fighter. Can control whether you'll wait to die or make the other guy think twice. Can control your mindset. And sometimes mindset is all you have. Weber asks if Donovan is afraid. Donovan laughs. Every time. Every mission. Every time I see a Bf 109 on the horizon. Fear doesn't go away. You just learn to make fear work for you instead of against you. Weber flies his first mission 2 days later. Bombing of an oil refinery near Dresden. 3 FW-190s attack the bomber. Weber applies the doctrine. Shoots early. Shoots a lot. Shoots like his life depends on making the German pilots doubt their choices. Because it does. 1 FW-190 is hit and pulls away trailing smoke. The other 2 retreat. Weber comes home. Alive. Shaking. Exhausted. But alive. He seeks out Donovan that night. Says nothing. Just shakes his hand. Donovan understands. May 1945. Germany surrenders. The war in Europe ends. Men celebrate. Drink. Cry. Write letters home saying they survived. Donovan receives orders to return to the United States. The war in the Pacific continues, but B-17 bombers aren't needed there. B-29 Superfortress dominates the skies over Japan. Donovan's work is finished. He boards a transport ship in Southampton, crosses the Atlantic with hundreds of other veterans. Men who saw things they'll never forget. Men who did things they'll never tell. Men who survived when statistics said they shouldn't. During the crossing, Donovan spends time on deck looking at the ocean. Thinks about the 4 minutes that changed everything. Thinks about the 300 people he trained. Thinks about the 3,000 who survived because of the doctrine. Thinks about those who didn't survive. Those who applied everything right and still died, because sometimes you do everything right and still lose. Because war isn't fair. Because bullets don't respect courage or technique or philosophy. Because sometimes you're just unlucky. A young soldier approaches. Recognizes Donovan from the base at Bassingbourn. Asks if it's true he shot down 12 Bf 109s in 4 minutes. Donovan corrects. 3 confirmed. 9 driven off. And it wasn't 4 minutes. It was 3 minutes and 58 seconds. The soldier laughs. Asks what's the difference. Donovan doesn't laugh. The difference is precision. The difference is not exaggerating. The difference is respecting what really happened instead of turning it into legend. Legends don't help anyone. Facts help. Techniques help. Mindset helps. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy from Boston who figured out that attacking works better than waiting to die. The ship arrives in New York on a June morning. Donovan steps on American soil for the first time in 2 years. Goes to South Boston. To the same house. The same street. The same neighborhood where he learned that whoever hesitates loses. His parents are older. His father has more gray hair. His mother cries when she sees him. Neighbors appear. Want to hear stories. Want to know about combat. Want to know if he killed Germans. Want to know if he's a hero. Donovan doesn't tell stories. Says he did his job. Says he was lucky. Says he met good people who didn't come back. Drinks beer with his father. His father doesn't ask many questions. Just says one thing. Did you hit first? Donovan smiles for the first time in months. Always. His father nods. Good. The Air Force offers Donovan promotion and permanent instructor position. He declines. Doesn't want to be near bombers anymore. Doesn't want to teach people to kill anymore. Doesn't want to wake up thinking about tracers and fire and men burning at 7,000 meters. wants to live, wants to forget, wants to try to be normal again. He uses the GI Bill to study mechanical engineering. University of Massachusetts. Graduates in 1949. Gets job at a factory in Quincy. Marries a girl from Dorchester named Margaret. Has 3 children. Buys a house. Lives American suburban life. Plays softball on Sundays. Goes to church occasionally. Drinks beer with friends in local bars. Never talks about the war. The children ask. Want to know what their father did. Want to know if he's a hero. Donovan says he worked on bombers. Says he was very lucky. Changes the subject. Margaret knows there's more. Knows there are nights when he wakes up sweating. Knows there are moments when he looks at the sky and sees something she doesn't see. Knows there are parts of him that are still at 7,000 meters over Germany firing machine guns at fighters coming to kill him. She doesn't push. Just holds his hand on those nights. Just is there. Just loves the man who came back even though pieces of him stayed in the European sky. Years pass. Decades. Donovan retires from the factory in 1982. 62 years old. Gray hair. Aching back from 33 years of manual labor. Calloused hands. Face marked by time. But still with the sharp eyes of a gunner who learned to see threats before they see you. 1984. An Air Force historian named Dr. Richard Caldwell is researching defensive gunnery tactics during World War II. Finds references to the Donovan Doctrine in declassified documents. Gets intrigued. Tracks Michael Donovan to South Boston. Calls. Asks for an interview. Donovan is reluctant. Doesn't want to relive. Doesn't want to remember. Doesn't want to be studied like a historical specimen. But Caldwell is persistent. Explains that the doctrine saved lives. Explains that it deserves to be documented. Explains that future generations should know. Donovan agrees with one condition. No heroism. No glorification. Just facts. Just techniques. Just the truth about how aggressive mindset changed survival in aerial combat. They meet at a cafe in South Boston. Caldwell brings recorder. Donovan brings memories he tried to bury for 40 years. The interview lasts 6 hours. Donovan describes the 4 minutes over Germany. Describes each decision. Each calculation. Each moment of doubt and certainty. Describes the sound of the Brownings. The smell of gunpowder. The cutting cold. The adrenaline. The fear. The strange clarity that comes when you accept you might die and decide to make the other guy die first. Describes the workshops. The 300 gunners. The techniques. The psychology. The philosophy of attacking when everyone says to defend. Caldwell asks how he feels about having changed military doctrine. About having saved 3,000 lives. About being responsible for techniques that killed German pilots. Donovan is quiet for a long time. Finally says, I didn't change anything. I just stopped following stupid rules. The rules said to wait until the enemy was in ideal range. The rules said to conserve ammunition. The rules said to be defensive. The rules killed people. So I ignored the rules and lived. And taught other people to ignore the rules and live. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who realized survival matters more than protocol. Caldwell asks if he has regrets. Donovan looks out the cafe window. Sees South Boston. Sees the same streets where he grew up. Sees the same neighborhood that taught that you hit first or get hit. Sees all the life he lived after the war. The children. The grandchildren. The decades of normalcy. And then thinks about the faces of the 300 gunners he trained. Thinks about the 3,000 who survived. Thinks about those who didn't survive. Thinks about the German pilots he killed. Young men like him. With families like his. With dreams like his. Who died because he was better at killing than they were. Yes. I regret having to do it. I regret having to kill. I regret having to teach others to kill. I regret that war exists. But I don't regret keeping people alive. Don't regret giving them a chance to come home. Don't regret choosing my comrades over the enemy. Does that make me a monster? Maybe. But it makes me a living monster, and kept 3,000 others alive. So I'll live with that. The interview ends. Caldwell thanks him. Promises to send a copy of the book when it's published. Donovan nods. Not sure he'll read it. 1987. Aggressive Defense. The Donovan Doctrine and Aerial Gunnery in World War II is published by Naval Institute Press. Cover shows AB-17 Flying Fortress. Back cover has brief biography of Michael Donovan. The book is well received in military circles. Becomes reference text in war schools. Is cited in aerial combat doctrine manuals. Inspires discussions about when rules should be followed and when they should be broken. Donovan receives a copy in the mail. Sits on the coffee table for 2 weeks. Margaret asks if he'll read it. He says maybe. Eventually opens it. Reads slowly. Relives everything. The 4 minutes. The workshops. The gunners. The lives saved. The lives lost. Closes the book. Puts it back on the table. Margaret asks what he thinks. Donovan says, it's correct. The facts are all there. The techniques are all explained. But books don't capture everything. Don't capture the cold. The fear. The moment when you decide you'll attack even though every instinct says to hide. Don't capture what stays with you afterward. But I guess it's close enough. The Air Force invites Donovan to honors ceremony. Want to give retroactive medal. Want formal recognition of the doctrine. Want to put him on stage and celebrate contribution. Donovan politely declines. Says he doesn't need medals. Says he doesn't want attention. Says the 300 gunners who applied the doctrine deserve recognition more than him. Says the 3,000 who survived are the only recognition that matters. December 1991. 50 years since Pearl Harbor. The country is celebrating World War II veterans. TV programs. Newspaper articles. Memorial events. The greatest generation is aging. Many have already died. Those who remain are treated as national treasures. Donovan is 71 years old. Retired for 9 years. Spends time with grandchildren. Plays chess at the community center. Lives quiet life. CBS wants to do segment for 60 Minutes program about innovative tactics in World War II. Want to interview Donovan. Want to film him. Want to tell the story of the 4 minutes and the doctrine that changed aerial combat. Donovan initially declines. But Margaret convinces him. Says the grandchildren should know. Says the story deserves to be told. Says he spent 50 years hiding and maybe it's time to stop hiding. He agrees. The 60 Minutes crew comes to South Boston. Set up lights and cameras in the living room. The reporter is young. Too young. Born after the war. Has no reference. Doesn't understand context. Asks questions that seem naive to someone who lived through it. How did you feel when you realized you had developed a new tactic? Donovan almost laughs. I didn't develop a tactic. I just decided not to die. The tactic came from the decision to survive. It wasn't brilliant insight. It was desperation transformed into action. Did you know you were changing history? No. I knew I was trying not to be killed by 12 Bf 109s. History was an accident. What would you say to young people who see you as a hero? Donovan stops. Looks directly at the camera. Chooses words carefully. I'm not a hero. Heroes are people in stories. I'm just someone who was scared and decided to do something about the fear. If there's a lesson, it's this: rules are useful until they're not. Protocol is good until protocol kills you. Sometimes you have to trust your instinct even when everyone says you're wrong. But that's not heroism. It's survival. And survival isn't glamorous. It's brutal and scary and leaves scars that don't show on skin. So if young people see me as a hero, they're seeing it wrong. They should see someone who did what had to be done and was lucky to live to tell about it. The segment airs in January 1992. 12 minutes of broadcast time. Archive footage of B-17's. Interview with Donovan. Commentary from military historians. Statistics about lives saved. It's well received. Donovan receives letters. Dozens of them. From veterans who applied the doctrine. From sons of men who survived because of it. From military history students. From modern Air Force pilots who studied the techniques. All say variations of the same thing. Thank you. Thank you for keeping my father alive. Thank you for changing the rules. Thank you for teaching that survival matters more than protocol. Donovan reads each letter. Margaret finds him crying one night in the kitchen with a stack of letters on the table. She says nothing, just sits with him, holds his hand. After a long silence he says, 50 years. 50 years trying to forget. Trying to be normal. Trying not to think about the 4 minutes, or the 300 gunners, or the 3,000 who survived, or those who didn't survive. And now these letters. All these people saying thank you. As if I had done something noble. As if I had been a hero. But I wasn't. I was just scared and trying not to die. And yes, I taught others to do the same. But that doesn't erase the German pilots I killed. Doesn't erase the faces of the men I trained who died anyway because sometimes doing everything right isn't enough. Doesn't erase 50 years of nights awake seeing tracers in the dark. Margaret squeezes his hand. You saved 3,000 lives. That doesn't erase anything. But it means something. You can carry both. The weight and the meaning. You don't have to choose. Donovan nods. Wipes his eyes. Carefully folds the letters. Puts them in a box. The box goes in the closet. He doesn't look again for years. September 2001. Donovan is 81 years old. Margaret died 2 years before. Cancer. Fast and brutal. He lives alone now in the same house in South Boston. The children want him to move to a retirement home. He refuses. Says as long as he can walk and think he'll stay in his own house. September 11th. Donovan is watching TV when the first plane hits the North Tower. Watches the second plane hit the South Tower live. Watches the towers fall. Watches the Pentagon burn. Watches the country go into shock. That night he sits in the same chair where he gave the interview for 60 Minutes 9 years before. Thinks about war. About how it changes but stays the same. About how each generation thinks their war is different until they realize war is always the same. Fear. Violence. Loss. And the choice between being victim or fighter. His oldest son calls. Asks if he's okay. Asks if he's watching the news. Asks if this brings back memories of the war. Donovan says, they never left. The memories. You just learned to live with them. And now a new generation will learn the same lesson. Will learn that sometimes you have to fight. Will learn that rules don't always apply. Will learn that survival requires doing things you never thought you'd have to do. Will learn that heroes are just scared people who decided to act. And will learn that it leaves scars that never fully heal. In the following months, as the United States enters war in Afghanistan and eventually Iraq, Donovan watches the news obsessively. Sees young soldiers boarding for combat zones. Sees families saying goodbye. Sees the cycle repeat. Receives call from the Air Force in March 2003. A colonel too young to have known Donovan personally, but who studied the doctrine in war school. He explains the Air Force is revisiting aerial combat tactics, is examining how principles of the Donovan Doctrine can apply to modern war. Wants consultation, wants perspective, wants wisdom from someone who changed paradigms 70 years before. Donovan laughs, not with humor, with irony. I'm 83 years old. Last combat I saw was in 1945. Planes are different. Weapons are different. Enemies are different. What can I teach? The colonel responds, mindset doesn't change. Technology changes. Tactics change. But combat psychology remains. The choice between defensive and offensive remains. The decision to attack when protocol says to defend remains. That's what we want to learn. Not specific techniques. The philosophy behind them. Donovan thinks. Finally says, okay, but one condition. You teach that survival is the goal. Not glory. Not heroism. Not medals. Survival. Getting people home. Everything else is secondary. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Then I'll help. In the following months, Donovan has regular phone conversations with Air Force strategists. Doesn't teach specific bomber gunnery tactics. Those are obsolete. Teaches mindset. Teaches when to break rules. Teaches how to create psychological doubt in adversaries. Teaches that predators hunt prey but avoid threats. Teaches that making your side seem more dangerous than it's worth is sometimes better than actually being stronger. Teaches lessons he learned at 7,000 meters over Germany in 1944. Lessons that remain true even when planes are supersonic jets and weapons are guided missiles and enemies use guerrilla tactics. Because war changes but humans don't. Fear is universal. Doubt is universal. Survival instinct is universal. And these universalities can be exploited. May 2005. Donovan is 85 years old. Health is failing. Weak heart. Lungs compromised by decades of factory work and smoking in youth. The children finally convince him to move to assisted living facility. He resists but knows he has no choice. The house in South Boston is sold. Belongings from a lifetime are packed in boxes. Among them is the box with the letters from 1992. The box with medals he never wears. The box with copy of Aggressive Defense that he read once and never opened again. At the assisted living facility he has a small room, bed, chair, TV, window overlooking parking lot. It's not much, but it's enough. Other residents know he's a veteran. Word spreads about the Donovan Doctrine. About the 4 minutes. About the 3,000 saved. Younger veterans come to talk with him. Vietnam veterans. Gulf War veterans. Some from the current wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, already retired from injuries. They want to hear stories. Want wisdom. Want connection with someone who understands. Donovan talks with them. Not about glory or heroism. About survival. About doing what's necessary. About living with choices you made in impossible moments. About carrying the weight of having lived when others didn't. A young Iraq veteran, 24 years old, leg amputated by IED, asks how Donovan deals with survivor's guilt. Donovan has no easy answer. Says only, you don't deal with it. You carry it. Every day. For your whole life. And some days the weight is unbearable. But you carry it anyway because those who didn't survive don't have a choice. You do. So you honor them by living as well as possible. Not perfectly. Nobody lives perfectly after war. But honestly. Fully. Without wasting the life they didn't get a chance to live. The young veteran cries. Donovan holds his shoulder. Says nothing more. Doesn't need to. March 2009. Donovan is 89 years old. Body is failing but mind is still sharp. He knows he doesn't have much time. Children visit regularly. Grandchildren bring great-grandchildren. Small humans who will never know war. Who will grow up in a world where World War II is ancient history. Where Bf-109s and B-17s are images in textbooks. Where 4 minutes that changed aerial combat doctrine are a forgotten footnote. He's okay with that. Wants them never to have to learn the lessons he learned. A young historian, grandson of one of the 300 gunners Donovan trained, comes to interview him. Brings digital recorder. Very different from the analog recorder Caldwell brought 25 years before. He wants to document oral history. Wants to preserve Donovan's voice. Wants to ensure future generations can hear directly from the man who changed aerial combat. Donovan agrees. But this time he speaks differently. Not about tactics. Not about techniques. About cost. People read about the Donovan Doctrine and think about tactical innovation. Think about victories. Think about 3,000 lives saved. That's right. But it's not complete. Because for every life saved there was a life lost. German pilots who never came home. Young men like me. With families like mine. With dreams like mine. I killed them. Not personally in all cases, but I trained people who killed them. And that's something I carry. Not with pride. Not with shame. Just with knowledge that war requires doing the impossible. Requires killing or being killed. Requires choosing your side and accepting consequences. I chose. Would do it again. But I don't celebrate. I just acknowledge. The historian asks what Donovan wants people to remember about the 4 minutes over Germany in 1944. Donovan closes his eyes. Thinks for a long time. Finally says, I want them to remember that rules exist for a reason, but sometimes the reason is wrong. I want them to remember that survival sometimes requires doing the unexpected. I want them to remember that 3,000 people lived because someone decided protocol mattered less than life. But mainly, I want them to remember that war has a cost. Cost measured in lives. In trauma. In sleepless nights for decades after. And that before starting wars we should be absolutely certain it's worth that cost. Because even when you win, you lose something. You lose innocence. You lose part of yourself that stays forever at 7,000 meters over foreign land, shooting at people you don't know for reasons that seem to make sense at the time, but that become less clear with each passing year. The interview ends. The historian thanks him. Promises to preserve the words. Promises to ensure the story stays alive. Donovan nods. He's tired. Always tired now. June 2009. Donovan is in a hospital bed. Pneumonia. Body can't fight anymore. Children are around the bed. Hold hands. Say they love him. Say he was a good father. Say he made a difference. Donovan smiles weakly. Squeezes hands back. His last words aren't about war. Aren't about the 4 minutes. Aren't about the doctrine or the 3,000 or the paradigm shift. They're about Margaret. About missing her. About being ready to see her again. He dies quietly. Without pain. Without drama. Just slides gently from life into whatever comes after. Michael Donovan. Sergeant. Gunner. Innovator. Instructor. Survivor. Dead at 89 years old. The obituary in the Boston Globe is small. 2 paragraphs. Mentions service in World War II. Mentions 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Doesn't mention the 4 minutes. Doesn't mention the doctrine. Doesn't mention the 3,000. Because the family wants privacy. Because Donovan never wanted to be famous. Because some stories are too important to be reduced to a newspaper obituary. But in the United States Air Force, the name Donovan is remembered. In war schools, the Donovan Doctrine is still taught. Not the specific tactics. Those are obsolete. But the philosophy, the mindset, the principle that sometimes attack is the best defense. That sometimes breaking rules saves lives. That sometimes protocol is wrong and you have to trust instinct. That survival matters more than procedure. Veterans who applied the doctrine, the few still living, remember. Families of the 3,000 who survived remember. Military historians remember. And somewhere in the sky over Germany, if ghosts exist, perhaps 12 Bf 109 pilots remember the tail gunner who decided to attack when he should defend. The crazy American who shot at 3,000 meters. The predator who refused to be prey. And maybe, just maybe, they understand. Because in the end, they were all just scared young men trying to survive. Some got lucky. Some didn't. But all made impossible choices in impossible moments. And those choices echo through decades. March 6, 1944. 4 minutes that changed aerial combat doctrine. One man who decided that surviving mattered more than following rules. 3,000 lives saved over 2 years. And a lesson that remains true. Sometimes the path to living is doing what nobody expects. Sometimes you have to hit first. Sometimes you have to be the predator. And sometimes, just sometimes, that makes all the difference between living and dying, between coming home and never seeing family again, between being a statistic and being a survivor. Michael Donovan chose to survive, and taught 3,000 others to do the same. That didn't make him a hero, made him human. Human who refused to accept that death was inevitable. Human who defied protocol and won. Human who carried the weight of his choices for 65 years after the war. Human who lived a long life and died quietly surrounded by family. And in the end, maybe that's all that matters. Not the victories. Not the doctrine. Not the 3,000 lives saved. But the fact that a kid from South Boston flew to war terrified and came back alive. Lived. Loved. Built a family. Had a long life. And when he died knowing he made a difference. Not because he was a hero, but because he was a survivor. And because he taught others to survive. And because in the brutal calculus of war, survival is victory enough. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far our content is reaching. And also subscribe to our channel so you have access to incredible stories for free. Big hug and see you in the next video.